Welcome into an exciting episode of the Scene Project Sports Network. I am your host, Bubba Starts, and with me today from Accedo, Luke Gaiden. Luke, welcome to the show.
Bubba, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, we're going to have some fun sports talk and more on the media side and where things are going. But before we get into that, I would love to just give you the floor and get a little bit of your backstory before we talk about the company as a whole.
Sure thing. So I am, now a 25-year veteran of the media industry, which is a horrific thing to have to admit to. But I started working with a broadcaster in the UK, Channel 4 is relatively well known. I was there for a few years. This was in the early 2000s. I then spent a number of years at a company called Bright Cove, which was the first online video platform of its kind, a SaaS company headquartered out of Boston. There are now any number of different companies that you can buy video streaming, video players, encoding, all that kind of thing. But Bright Cove was one of the first. I was there for 9 years, doing various roles, running account management, media sales. And then the latter part, I helped incubate a joint venture between Bright Cove and Excedo. We brought a very, very cost-effective, very flexible OTT video platform to the market. Again, one of the first of its kind. And that was how I got to know the folks at Excedo. Jumped ship, went and did some consulting, worked for companies like Sony in the US, doing a little bit of business development work, kind of looking at new initiatives, new revenue streams. But then Excedo offered me a job, came back, did a couple of years with them, went off and did about 4 years of entrepreneurialism in the sustainability side of things, which was kind of scratching both a business and I guess a personal itch. Very rewarding in every sense except commercially. And then about 18 months ago, I got a call from Excedo while I was skiing, funnily enough. So I was kind of on a chairlift in France, having a call with them, which is great, saying would I come back and help them take their product portfolio, their software product portfolio onto the next stage. And I said, yes, I've been there for the last year and a half and loving being back. It's a great company, great people, very well respected, wonderful culture. And I think we work with some really interesting brands, media entertainment in sports, obviously, which we'll talk about. And I think, really, really exciting future for us. But I guess that's the last 25 years. And what did I do that in? Under 60 seconds?
Yeah, more like 2.5 minutes, but pretty darn good.
I'll get it tighter if we have to do a rerun.
No, what an interesting career that you've had working in the streaming space in the early days when no one really knew what it was, and it seemed like broadcast giants were going to be around forever. And fast forward now a decade and a half, and they are crumbling right before our eyes. And the only thing that's really keeping them on the air right now are sports. Right. But there's fragmented attention has created an opening for, companies like Excedo and I'm sure other competitors as well to bring OTT streaming and the video players on our phones and the apps and just everything that you guys are doing. I know you're pretty much a full stack, creative and player side and development and the business and creating a lot of things for these brands on the back end. But it's crazy that you've been on the forefront of this the whole time. Like you've been able to see this moment coming for at least a decade.
Yeah, it's when I think back to the early 2000s when I was at Channel 4, like it was, I wonder if we can get some kind of like 2 to 5 minute clips of programs up, on the internet. And, we were using Flash Player. Do you remember Flash Player? Probably not. Like there were no standards. Everything was super expensive. Everything had to have unique and custom workflows. It was a technical challenge, Bubba, in those days. People weren't necessarily thinking, they were thinking far ahead about the monetization, but we were seeing that video was going to become the dominant form of communication on the internet, and the internet was going to become the dominant form of, well, kind of everything, really. And so Channel 4 was always a pretty progressive looking broadcast. I think they spotted, if you will, the way that the wind was blowing. And so they kind of jumped on that. But when I got to Bright Cove, that was when we first started seeing technology tools, platforms that could radically simplify the complexity of delivering online video. But it took a lot longer than we thought it would. We thought that the big, shift towards, digitally distributed video would happen probably 10 years, maybe 15 years before it did. You should never underestimate kind of quite how slowly the media and entertainment industry can move. I think what's so interesting about sports is, if you look back at the history of video over the internet, it was all on demand content. It was like shows, it was movies. So you encode it, you wrap it up in this, you put it on a platform, somebody subscribes. So it's a model that is much less risky because it's not live, right? The difference between on-demand content and live content in terms of obviously the risk profile, but in terms of the kind of operational care that you've got to wrap around it is significant. You screw up on an on-demand piece. It's kind of difficult to screw up on an on-demand piece of content, to be honest. But some people are like, oh, maybe I'll go watch another, I'll go watch a different show. I'll go watch a different movie. You screw up on the final or it doesn't actually, it doesn't matter whether it's the final or not, but on a live sports thing, you'll hear about it. And it doesn't matter if it's college football. It doesn't matter if it's the World Cup final. You get live fans going, what the hell?
And you hear about it immediately.
Immediately. Yeah. I mean, literally you got fans, battering your door down. So I think that the where we're at now, which is, there is an expectation that has been achieved, which is that you will be able to access pretty much every sport for pretty much every occasion via some form of digital transfer. That's taken a long time to get to that point where it is where the level of consumer expectation is actually matched by the technology and the operational excellence and resilience, if you will. But it took a while. I think what's so interesting about sports is, there's no sign of sports becoming less popular, right? People aren't watching less sports. They're watching more because it's more accessible. And you then sort of layer over, in my son, we talk about football, soccer, right? He doesn't want to know how Chelsea's doing in the Premiership, and he should. We're fifth. Thank you for asking. He wants to know whether Ronaldo is better than Messi. Messi's better again. There's that sports plus celebrity equals the new reality. So you have fans engaging with sports that weren't accessible to them before because they didn't even know about them. You've got fans engaging with the athletes. You then think about all of the content that can be created out of that, not just video, but audio, on-demand clips, live stuff on all the different social media platforms. It's huge. And that is why I think sports, I think all we can safely predict is that the amount of sports content that's produced and consumed over the next years is just going to go kind of up and up and up. Whether there's a threshold at which everybody goes, okay, that's enough now, that I don't know, but it's a very, very exciting time. And as a sports fan, it's wonderful.
Well, and I don't think there is a threshold for it because now the technology has become affordable enough to where not just the top echelon of leagues can afford to broadcast their games live over the internet or an app or, YouTube, which we watch a lot of games now. One of our co-hosts on the channel, Coach Cody, he coaches a AIF team, so Arena Indoor Football, right? And they had a game in Wyoming last week and broadcasted live onto YouTube. And, I don't know what they're using to do that necessarily. I know we have some other things that our local high school is using, and not to shout out other companies while we're here with Excedo, but there are platforms out there that are allowing amateur teams to broadcast live over the internet now and to bring these to there. So while the demand might not be massive for the individual teams, for the high school sports fan, who has, a kid who has grandparents who live in another state, they can watch their grandson or granddaughter.
I know, isn't that cool?
That's incredible to me.
Awesome.
And like, there's never going to be a lack of demand for that.
Yeah.
And it's how do we bring this into every single school or, smaller semi-pro or, even, professional teams, but on a smaller scale and amateur sports. And there's just so much growth that can remain to happen. If there is a threshold, we may not see it for another decade.
Yeah, agreed. And to your point, I think with sports, it does, and amateur sports, college sports, however you want to term it, the excitement that it generates is just as important. The enthusiasm, the passion that game will have generated with the fans, with the parents, with the community, is to have the technology available now to enable people to see that. It doesn't matter that it's a small base. They're not out there trying to be the next NFL or what have you. What they want to be able to do is to share those moments, to share that excitement. You don't have to, you son, oh, Dad, how come you're not at the game? Well, I had to go to work or I had to do this. You don't have to miss it anymore. That's exciting. And I think it speaks again to the passion that sports generates, which again, I'll use the word is enduring. It's not seasonal. It's not, well, this type of movie is in vogue or that type of comedy is in vogue. You're talking about the power of sports to deliver emotion. And you're talking about the importance of sports. I live in a small town on the island of Mallorca, a small island in Spain. And the town football pitch, soccer pitch, is busy 6 days out of 7. There are kids practicing from the age of 7 upwards. Parents are watching. There are leagues. It's and this is the population. I would think if we're 1,000 people, I wouldn't have thought it's even that. And yet, that's how busy the soccer pitch is. It's probably also why they keep winning the World Cups and the Euros, because they take it pretty seriously. But yeah, and that's what you get from sports.
No, and for us, it's the basketball courts and the baseball fields, and it's a lot different. Obviously, soccer and football not as prevalent out here, but I live in a town the same size in the middle of, we're not in the middle of an ocean or a sea, but we are very much small and in the middle of an ocean of cornfields. And farmland, right, can be much the same. And our local sports are the epitome of our sports culture. We don't have, in Sioux Falls, which is, an hour and a half away, we do have some lower level. We have a USHL team, which is, a couple steps down from the NHL. And we do have, an arena football league team that plays there and some of these other things. But even they don't necessarily have access, or they have access, but they don't invest into the broadcasting of these, right, using their rights to benefit them and to bring their game to their fans. And that's why I was so excited to get on a call with you, is to talk about what's the bridge. Well, what's the bridge between that? Is Excedo for the leagues, or is Excedo more for individual teams and brands to help them broadcast that, their product, right? On the field or on the ice, or, in the stadium product to their fans? Or is it more at a league level that Excedo works at?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we have 2 parts of our business. One, the bit that I work in, we more work with the leagues. We work with broadcasters. We work with, marquee events, marquee sports brands. The other side of the business is looking more at helping the smaller companies, whether they're broadcasters, whether they're niche OTT players, whether they are smaller sports teams, smaller sports, full stop, I guess. And there, the difference really is twofold. Number one is, how much investment is available to spend on the technology, and that's obviously very, very different. But I think almost more important is kind of how to make it as easy as possible. You can talk about operational overhead and stuff like that. But really, if you're a small team, if you're a team, supporting from a small town, and you want to be able to you want to be able to distribute your games over the internet, you don't have somebody whose job it is to do that 5 days a week, right? You're going to have somebody who's going to be running around, they're doing a bunch of other stuff, and they just want to be able to kind of press a couple of buttons, set some things up, and it's delivered. So it's also how much time, how many resources you have to kind of manage that. The difference between something that is all about business and versus something that is more about delivering content to a very committed, very passionate, but probably very small fan base. The guys over here, they're not looking to generate dollars, right? They're looking to deliver something to fans, to a community, to people who are interested. Guys over here, it's business. So I think that's probably a good way of looking at the difference between the two audiences that we serve typically.
Yeah, it's so incredible that we find ourselves here, that the power to broadcast these sports and everything that it means, these moments. And what we've now done with the Scene Project Sports Network is we worked very closely with our high school football coach this year to do a weekly coaches show like you might see on a larger network. But it was just to bring more of this to there. And we broke down the tape that was broadcast on the YouTube channel with the app that they had and used that would break it down into the highlights of the game. Coach was able to, go and pick these out. Hey, this is what we're going to use. Throw it up on a big screen in his classroom and to go through them one by one. And I thought that was just so cool to see where technology has come, because in my day, we had VHS tapes that we were trying. We didn't watch a lot of tape because it was nearly impossible to do anything with it.
Well, they made pretty good paperweights. I've still got some VHS tapes, but just on the content point is super interesting. So what I think we've all realized is that proximity to the subject, in this case, the football game, and the authenticity of the person delivering the content or wrapping around the content, like the coach, trumps production quality. Like, it's not even in the same league. What you want is somebody who knows what they're talking about, who is close to it, he's the coach. Like, if it's not backed up by a thousands and thousands of dollars worth of production quality, it doesn't matter. I think there's a great example of this where this was years ago, like almost in the early days, where you'd get like a grainy piece of footage of like the stealth bomber coming over an air show. And that piece of content, because it was proximate, because it was authentic, because it was, exclusive, because you're not supposed to be able to film stealth bombers probably, and it's not a brilliant analogy, but like that was gold to fans of the air show. You wouldn't put that on the news, it's not a high end piece of programmatic content or even news content, but it didn't matter. It resonated with the audience and they loved it. And it was a light bulb moment for a lot of people in broadcasting, call it the rise of good enough content. That's not intended to be a sort of judgmental. It's intended to say, depending on the audience, depending on the topic, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on production value. You give somebody what they want, you package it in the right way, and that's good enough, and people will love that. So I think what you've done with the coach is a great example of that. And what you see is that, people aren't looking for lots of green screen and fireworks and Janet Jackson singing in the halftime interval. Or sorry, it was Bad Bunny this year, wasn't it? Sorry, I'm a little out of date. I haven't watched the Super Bowl
and what we saw during the halftime show, both in the stadium and, with the Turning Point USA show, next year, because I have connections to the music world with the Scene projects and everything that we've built there, I'm going to do my own show. We did a Super Bowl watch along. We did a Super Bowl watch along party. So why would I say, okay, well, we're going to take a break, go watch the halftime show, when I can just run a half hour of my own content, people that have been on my shows and my songwriter showcases, and just run you a reel of all of the things that we did during the year. Now, granted, it might not be live and in your face, maybe one day, but until the need for more than good enough arises, good enough is good enough.
It's good enough. Yeah.
I had so many people, and granted, some of our, we weren't doing thousands of views on these coaches shows, but there was hundreds of views. And I've had so many compliments from parents and grandparents that were like, oh, well, you do this other sport. And so to your point, like I can't really do the show without somebody knowledgeable, a coach or access like that on the others. So if the coach doesn't want to do it, I'm kind of on the outside. I'm not covering, high school girls volleyball because I don't know anything about it, right?
Yeah,
but I
that's
will
the
show
authenticity.
up and produce. Yeah, I will show up and host and produce the show and to talk about them and to, question the coaches and things. But without their involvement, I have no show, right? Like it's about you and your team. I'm not building a show just to cover it. Nobody's watching it, right? Like there's no monetary value to me. And really, if you don't want to talk to me about your players and what our head coach had touched on was that this is so good for these players. It's getting them an extra bit of juice out there when it comes to all conference selections. They have a little bit more tape that's out in the world. Maybe saw their name and for me, we were kind of talking about this before we ever sat down and did an episode, but that was the light bulb moment for me. It was like, now we have to do it. Where I was just putting out an offer to spend some time with the coach and thought it would be cool to try and just see, and for me to get reps in doing it. Once he was like, oh, this will be so good for the kids, I was like, well, now we have to do it. Right?
Yeah. Now as you brought the kids into it, now I got to do it.
Right. And we did maybe, I think 6 or 7 episodes. It was really lovely to be able to spend the time with coach to learn more about the game for myself in a selfish way, right? I was like, this is just cool to learn.
That's like one-to-one tutorial you got in
40 years of experience, man. Yeah, he crested his 200th or 300th win this year, right? Like this man has an incredible in high school football. He's been doing it for a long time. And I thought it was incredible. And now I found out he's an avid golfer as well. So now I get to take him out on the course and shoot some content this summer as well. So, and Coach Cody is one of our co-hosts for our Vikings United show and is kind of our professional analyst on that end. But now he coaches 3 or 4 other teams. So now we have an in to cover those teams as well and to see it grow. And yeah, that's why I was excited to have you and to form a relationship with Accedo and the XRA and everything that's growing in sports now, not necessarily to have the opportunity to cover the massive leagues. How do I bring this knowledge and these people together with the people that I'm already connected to? And that's what I'm excited about for the future. Luke, I would love to have you tell us kind of from your position in the company, as you said, kind of head of product. What does the future of Accedo look like for the next, maybe 2 to 5 years?
Well, world domination, obviously, that's a given. No, so we are on a journey to kind of change our business model so that we are becoming more of a managed services provider. So what that means is that we will build your service for you. We'll use our software, we'll use our services. But, over the last 20 years, we've picked up a little bit of knowledge about what it takes to run a successful streaming business. And so as a managed services partner, we can really bring all of that knowledge to bear to help our customers figure out technical, operational, commercial challenges. That is a body of knowledge, a body of insight, a body of experience learned the hard way. Until you've been responsible for a live sports event where the viewership is in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, you just don't know what it's like. You can have all of the smarts and you can have all of the answers, but you need to have those scars in order to be able to really speak knowledgibly and again authentically about, okay, you do want to do this, you don't want to do this. There's a lot of hard-earned knowledge there. So we're looking to become more of a managed services provider. We're looking to become more of a partner in our customers' success. I think in terms of the areas that we work in and the markets that we focus on, sports is an area that we see nothing but growth in. It's an area where, I'll choose my words carefully. I think, with sports, particularly with rights holders, rights holders are very good at monetizing and protecting. They're good at monetizing their rights and protecting their brand. They know how to fill a stadium. They know how to sell merchandise. They know how to negotiate good rights deals for their content. What they don't necessarily know is about being a streaming business. And so there is more, more interest and more of an open-minded approach from sports rights holders to the idea of that kind of a partnership with a company like Excedo, who's got 20 years in the streaming space, who knows the technical, the operational, the commercial kind of pitfalls, also the opportunities, and say, okay, well, that is a partner whose core expertise is a complement to ours, as opposed to being, somewhat competitive to it, which in the case of some kind of media entertainment and pay TV operators, there's a little bit of, you always get, and I did this when I worked at Channel 4. It's like, well, we do some of that here. Why do we need you? You don't get that so much in sports, because like, well, we don't do that here. So yeah, we do need you. So I think in some respects, and particularly in a sort of managed services capacity, where, if I can use the phrase, probably more natural bedfellows. I think as well, you look at the investments that we as a company are continue to make around the use of AI, the use of data, the ways that technology is being deployed, but will be deployed to kind of really drive some incredible advances in the experience, the user experience for sports fans. That's super exciting. Like, that's innovation. That's being at the sharp end of creativity within the space, and that is somebody who's running product. That's kind of the fun part of my job, if you will. And so I think the direction of travel for us is very much towards becoming, partnering up with our customers, really helping them deliver successful, profitable businesses and services that kind of delight their audiences, their fans, whoever they may be. And the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of the fun stuff is going to be around seeing how the latest wave of technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's immersive formats, AR, VR, etc., seeing how they are really going to transform the user experience. And we come out of the user experience. That's where we started building delightful user experiences on a bunch of different, form factors, mobile, laptop, connected TVs. And so thinking about the changes that are coming, how do you switch from like a sort of standard sports broadcast into an augmented reality broadcast? Like, you're wearing the glasses, like, how do you do that in a way that isn't jarring? How do you make it seamless? How do you make it seem part of the overall experience? These are super fun things to be thinking about.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I'm so happy to know you and to, be connected to Excedo and the XR Alliance and everything that is moving forward, because I might not see this stuff for 20 years in South Dakota as the technology slowly trickles further and further out. But it's exciting to be here and to have an opportunity to bring it maybe to some of our people here in the Midwest ahead of the curve, and to really start turning people onto that immersive experience, which I just think is so cool. Where it's going, to put on the glasses or the headset and to feel like you are front row at the game and on the sidelines. I think that's a truly incredible, direction that media is going, and very happy that I took the dive into media myself and out of the welding career that I had built for myself, because this is fun. And I love sports so much, and I love live events so much. But how do we bring that experience to someone who can't necessarily get there because of the constraints of travel and everything else that comes along with, attending these live events? How can we create that user experience and elevate that experience from home? And I think that's really exciting what's going to happen over the next, 18 to, 50 some months.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ability to kind of have that stadium experience from your home, like, okay, we thought that the way to do that was just to build bigger and bigger and bigger television sets, and then you got curved television sets, and then you get surround sound. And to be fair, it's night and day. I remember the first, sports event I watched in HD. I remember the first one I watched with HD and surround sound, and it is a step change up in the experience. But the point at which these wearables become, frankly affordable, which for the most people, including me, they are not right now. Like, when they become affordable, they enter the kind of mainstream. And I don't think that's a long way off. I'm like, 12, 24 months, I hope. Then you will be able to experience that. You will have that stadium experience in a way that is, again, a complete step change from just watching it in traditional video, if I can say that. And the ability to kind of go, okay, I'm watching my favorite player right now. Let's have a look at their stats. let's have a look at his stats, her stats. Like, let's have a look at a clip of the last rush they made, or the tackle they did, or the interception, or the touchdown, or the 3-pointer, or the foul, or, you know, and that ability to kind of switch context, to switch between different forms. So, you know, you go into a short form piece of video, back into the live feed, you know, all the time with this sense of kind of a different sense of spatial awareness. That's, you know, again, for sports fans, that's like, wow, that is super cool. So imagine, you know, you'd be sitting in, I don't know if you're a Chiefs fan, I guess you probably are. I don't know whether, anyway, but let's say you're a Chiefs fan, like, how far is it to Kansas City from where you are?
Like 5.5 hours.
Okay, so you're not going to make the trip for every game, even if you could afford to. And I know what soccer tickets cost. I can't afford to go to every game. Like, that's going to be not a bad alternative. And so that's, you know, I think, again, the power of video, of the internet, was always to be able to bring content to the user in a way that was in a way that made sense to the user at the time, to the audience, to the fan. And this is just taking that a step further and a step further. So yeah, I think that particularly immersive technologies will unlock, you know, a different type of experience that will get you much closer to that live feeling, which is, you know, again, super exciting.
Well, and better than live, because you're going to be able to overlay the replays and the stats. And like, I don't think people understand how close to the future we are, and to what we used to see in movies with the overlays on these glasses, and what's going to be
going all the way back to like Minority Report with Tom
right,
Cruise. Remember
right.
that? Yeah,
a great example.
How long ago was that? That was 25 years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. I would say, almost 15 years ago that you had something like that. But yeah, we are not far away from the closing things and it being that augmented reality. And, you know, a conversation with mutual friend of ours, Lucy, from XRA, and having her being like, oh, we're there. The technology is there. Now it's not affordable for the everyman right now, but the technology is very close to being available to the public. And it may be 5 years from now that it comes down and it's commercially available, I would say, to, you know, the more general public, the working man, if you will. But it's right here. And it's pretty incredible to be, you know, for me, on these conversations now, and knowing what's coming and being able to see some of this tech as it rolls out and to be a part of it is incredible, because I want to bring that experience to the Midwest USA sports fan ahead of, you know, a couple decades from now.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, as soon as we have a set of glasses that I can ship without them getting broken, I'll make sure we put a package into you. But yeah, I mean, the sort of the dream is, you know, you order your headset, you know, it comes, it's, I don't know, $50. It's like hundreds of dollars now, sometimes thousands. That's just, you know, that's a that's a small subset of the overall sports fan base. It needs to get down to the tens, maybe higher than that, for it to be truly affordable. But I think, you know, the technology is there. It's just, how do you make it, you know, how do you bring it down, make it more accessible, which is, you know, it's the same process that we went through with the infrastructure that supports video over the internet in the first place. First, it was only the big players that could afford it. You had to have very, very deep pockets. Now it is broadly accessible to everyone. You know, it's pennies on the dollar. So I don't think we're far from that, which is exciting.
Excellent. Well, Luke, let everyone know where they can find more about, you know, Excedo, and, you know, talk about the products and purchase the products for brands and leagues that are watching and consuming this content. So, you know, they can become clients and partners of yours. And anything else you want to add before I let you go?
So we're at www.excedo.tv, and you can find us there, and you find about all of the things that we do, media entertainment in sports with the XRSA. You can hit me up at luke.gaiden@excedo.tv. Love to hear from anybody, but really just great to be on the show, Bubba. Thank you. And I think for, you know, I talk to a lot of sports rights holders. We talk to a lot of big brands. I think what I've always loved about sports, though, is how broad it is, like how passionate people get about it. And that isn't, you know, again, I come back to the little town soccer pitch over here. like listening to, my son's the worst soccer player on the field, to be honest with you, but he's 2 years behind him. But listening to the parents, like the passion when they're watching a game, or even they're screaming at the coach, going, "How come you didn't do this and that?" That's what I really enjoy about sports. Like that's the enthusiasm and the kind of energy that you kind of get up for. So
it's a universal language. Just like
it is a universal language.
You can understand sports no matter what language you speak. And we talked a little bit about my international travels, and for you as well, that it's all the same. Sport is the same wherever you go. So even if you don't speak the same language, you can step onto the field or the court and to be able to communicate and to engage with people of all cultures. And I find that to be truly inspiring.
I was walking down a street in Singapore in 1999. It was the first time I'd gone on like a big, journey by myself. And I just bumped into a guy, and he looked at me and he said, "English?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Football?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Leeds United?" And I was like, "No way." Anyway.
Absolutely lovely conversation, Luke. I hope you can spend just a few more minutes with me off camera. I have a few more questions for you, but I'm going to let you go off the interview for now. Thank you for being part of my day today, and thank you for being part of the scene.
Thank you, Bubba. It was great to be here. Really appreciate it.
SPSN.